Hello, everyone. Welcome to the DevOps Summit 2021. My name is Martin Coupland. I'm the head of DevOps at Transparency, who are a UK managed service provider. I'm also a DevOps ambassador with the DevOps Institute, as well as a Microsoft MVP and Microsoft Certified Trainer. In this session, we're going to be delivering a compact DevOps bootcamp. So this bootcamp is designed to condense a lot of the key information and key elements that you will need to be able to really go and implement DevOps within your organization. So this is not designed to be an exhaustive session of everything. That would obviously cover a long period of time. But what it is designed to do is give you the key things that you need to know to be able to go off and implement DevOps within your organization, and hopefully give you some ideas to be able to go do that yourselves. So let's begin. We're going to be talking about the following topics in this session. So we're going to start by level setting the foundations of DevOps and what DevOps is, and look at the 7 key pillars of DevOps. We're also going to look at exploring what those pillars are in more detail, and look at the relationship between them, as well as understand how to apply these fundamentals within your organization and really get moving when it comes to DevOps and get you into an area that you can then start to propel yourself forward. So first of all, let's look at the foundations of DevOps. First of all, it is really important to understand why organizations move to DevOps. So according to the 2019 State of DevOps report, top performers in DevOps deliver code faster, they have fewer bugs, and they resolve incidents more quickly. Some of the highlights in the report indicate the following statistics that back up those statements. So organizations practicing DevOps, they are 208 times more frequently deploying code than their competitors. They are 106 times faster with their lead time from commit to deploy. They are 2,604 times faster to recover from incidents. And their change failure rate is 7 times lower. Organizations that embrace DevOps simply get more done by utilizing a single team comprising of cross-functional members, all working in collaboration and to the same goal. DevOps organizations can deliver with maximum speed, functionality, and innovation. We need to look at what some of the key benefits are of DevOps and understand why organizations move to DevOps. You can put the benefits associated with DevOps into 3 main buckets. There are technical benefits, there are cultural benefits, and there are also business benefits as well. Let's just start by looking at business benefits. When we talk about business benefits, we mean things that make the business tick. These are things such as boosts in productivity, better quality products, and improved employee retention. Those are 3 big reasons, but there are also things that directly contribute to the success of the business, such as improved growth, customer satisfaction, and customer experience. So we're now going to look at some of the technical and cultural benefits that your organization can expect to achieve when they implement DevOps. First of all, from a technical perspective, okay, there are numerous technical benefits associated with DevOps. However, when you are all working towards DevOps transformation, it is important not to focus on the minute details too much and try to keep your eye on the broad benefits. The reason for this is that often those smaller benefits, while beneficial to you or your team, may not have broad benefits for other teams, the department, or even the organization. Keeping the organizational view ensures that you get maximum buy-in, both from the top down and also the bottom up. We always talk about top down being something really important in the adoption of DevOps, and it is really important, but bottom up support from your peers is also something else that is really important and crucial to success. Teams across the organization will feel similar benefits specific to their team as well as yours, and that's great. but you must focus on the bigger benefits from an organizational perspective. Three benefits stand out for me as critical and align with the preceding scenario that we've just talked about, thinking about the bigger picture. Those are continuous software delivery, the faster resolution of problems, and less complexity. It also presents an opportunity to provide more proactive and reactive management of any technical debt. The continuous integration and continuous deployment and delivery are the cornerstones of DevOps and are clear benefits. And we'll talk about them in a little bit more detail later. When implemented correctly, not only do they provide you clear benefits around the building and deployment of your applications, but they provide a means to catch any bad practices during development, as well as catching security issues and threats along the way. With the practices employed in DevOps, you are making your environment less complex. The reduction in complexity is attractive to organizations as well as individual teams. The best thing, is that the reduction in complexity can be in a number of different areas, such as workflows, meaning that you've automated manual tasks. It could be in the production documentation, for example. It also means removing unnecessary steps from your process. This could come in the form of value stream mapping exercises, as well as process improvement exercises such as Lean and Kaizen to identify and remove waste from your operation. The improvement in monitoring of your application and infrastructure that comes with DevOps also comes site reliability engineering, which is around the ability to recover from failures quickly. Site reliability engineering, or SRE, is the discipline that applies aspects of software engineering to infrastructure and operations problems. The level of telemetry provided and the shared understanding between teams of the application and infrastructure that supports the application, as well as the goals set out by the teams, is fundamental to the success of those teams. Let's now look at some of the cultural benefits. We talk heavily about the influence of culture in DevOps. Culture in DevOps is what binds our teams together. Happier, more productive teams, greater professional development opportunities, and a higher employee engagement are three really big cultural benefits that you can achieve from a successful implementation of DevOps. We just talked about the shared responsibilities that comes with DevOps. It's a big driver for cultural benefit as well. When teams are invested in those shared responsibilities, those common goals, and that one driving vision, that creates a culturally sound working environment that makes our employees happier and means that they're more productive. A further benefit to this is that higher employee engagement from the good culture that DevOps can breed. We're taught in DevOps the notions of fail fast and growth mindset. Both of these mean employees are more likely to voice their ideas, be open with each other, because the focus is not on blame. The focus is on making things better and sharing ideas that help achieve that common goal. When you put all of those things together, broaden your skills of the team quite naturally, you provide people with the tools and capabilities to expand their knowledge and further their careers. Organizations with true career growth opportunities are one of the biggest things new hires will look for. So DevOps can actually help your organization be attractive for new hires, as well as retain existing staff. Coming on to the last couple of points. In a non-DevOps environment, there's often a conflict between the releasing of new features and maintaining stability. The development team is evaluated based on the number of updates that they deliver, whereas the operations team is evaluated on the overall health of the system. In a DevOps environment, everyone on the team is responsible for both delivering new features as well as stability. Because code isn't thrown over the wall to operations at the end of development, the combination of a shared code base, as well as the practices of continuous integration and test-driven techniques, as well as the automated deployments that go with DevOps, and while many other things, expose issues in code infrastructure or configuration much earlier in the process. And it is that shared responsibility that really focuses the mind on fixing those things before they bleed into configuration. Because change sets are also a lot smaller, problems tend to be less complex. Engineers can use real-time data on system performance to be able to quickly understand the impact of application changes, and resolution times are reduced because team members don't have to wait for a different team to troubleshoot and resolve the issue. And finally, around increased effectiveness. In a typical IT environment, there's an enormous amount of waste as people wait for other people and other machines to do things, or they're stuck solving the same problems over and over again. Employees prefer to be productive, and the time spent churning causes frustration and unhappiness in the employee base. Everyone benefits when people can spend less time on unsatisfying aspects of their jobs and move to more time to adding value to their organization. Now we've looked more broadly at the reasons for organizations move to DevOps. Let's now look at some of the practices of DevOps in more detail. So DevOps can be summarized into 7 practices. Now, while a lot of them talk about technology, they all have roots in culture, people, and process. Technology is an enabler in DevOps, and we'll talk a little bit about this in a second. But first of all, let's look at configuration management. Configuration management is the practice of controlling and managing changes to software using version control in a standard and repeatable way. The practice really has 2 components to it, using version control and also using a standard repository strategy. And that strategy is what defines the process for branching and for merging. Continuous integration is a practice that requires developers to integrate code into a shared repository that we've just talked about and obtain rapid feedback on its success during active development. This is done as developers finish a specific piece of code and it has successfully passed any unit testing. CI, or continuous integration, is also creating a build in a tool. This could be Bamboo, Jenkins, GitLab. Could also be something like Azure DevOps and also GitHub as well. After the developer runs a check-in and any tests you have that can run on the build, it will provide feedback to the development team of whether it worked or whether it failed. And the end goal is to create small workable chunks of code that are validated and integrated back into the centralized repository as frequently as possible. As such, CI is the foundation for both continuous delivery and continuous deployment DevOps practices. Automated testing is the practice of using specialized software to be able to control the execution of software tests and also the comparison of results from those tests. Automation is relied upon to reduce the burden of running repetitive tasks manually, to speed up the execution of the testing process, and to allow the execution of involved or difficult tests. These automated tests are usually run during the CI build, as well as in an ad hoc manner whenever needed. The tests need to be automated, are unique to the maturity and needs of each program and should be determined on a case-by-case basis. Different types of testing include the ability to perform unit testing and component testing, as well as integration testing and end-to-end testing, not to mention security and performance testing as well. Now, infrastructure as code is used to define code that, when executed, can stand up a physical or virtual environment, including the computing and networking infrastructure. It's a type of infrastructure that operations teams can automatically manage and provision through code rather than using manual processes. An example of infrastructure as code would be using Terraform to rapidly stand up nodes in a cloud environment and then have the ability to destroy and rebuild the environment consistently each time. Doing so gives the user the ability to version control their infrastructure and be more agile when recovering from infrastructure outages. Continuous delivery is the practice of making every change to source code ready for a production release as soon as automated testing validates it. This includes automatically building, testing, and deploying. An approach to code approval and delivery approval needs to be in place to ensure that code can be deployed in an automated fashion with appropriate pauses for approval depending on the specific needs of the program. This also implies the same for lower environments as well outside of production, such as UAT and maybe QA. Continuous deployment is a practice that strives to automate the production deployment end to end. In order for this practice to be implemented, a team needs to have an extremely high confidence in their automated tests. The ultimate goal is that as long as the build has passed all automated tests, the code will be deployed. However, manual steps in the deployment process can be maintained if necessary. For example, a team can determine what type of changes can be deployed to production in a completely automated fashion, while other types of changes may maintain an approval step manually, such as a hybrid approach is a good way to begin to adopt this practice. And finally, continuous monitoring is the practice of proactively monitoring, alerting, and taking action in key areas to give teams visibility of the health of the application in a production environment. So now we've talked around the foundations of DevOps in some detail, let's now have a quick look at and explore the core pillars of DevOps. So the 4 pillars of DevOps are culture, people, process, and technology. So you'll notice that culture is the foundation of the house, if it were, with the pillars on top. If you go and implement DevOps with a focus on technology, which is what some organizations do, then you will find that your DevOps transformation fails. This is because you've not spent the time looking at the other pillars, which are culture, people, and process first. The flow should go something like this. Once you define and change your organization's culture, which can take a long time and shouldn't be underestimated how long that could take, that will help drive the people you need within your organization. And that will then in turn drive the processes that you need to create, the processes you need to change, and the processes that would benefit from automation. It is at that point that you can then bring technology on top, and you can start to look at applying technology tools to your processes to make them happen in a more efficient manner. If you go implement technology on top of bad processes, you simply make those bad processes happen not only faster, but without oversight as well. If you spend time making those processes a lot leaner and spend time making those processes fit for purpose, then adding technology on the top really adds value, and those processes are happening quicker, are good processes that add lots of value. And that is the focus of why you should focus on culture, people, and process before technology when it comes to DevOps. So I want to talk about how to apply these fundamentals into your organization and how you would go about implementing DevOps within your organization. So first of all, what makes culture in DevOps? What makes a DevOps culture? So on the diagram there, you can see that we have open communication, incentive and responsibility alignment, respect, and also trust. So let's start from the left-hand side. So when we talk about open communication, a DevOps culture is one that is created through discussion and debate. Okay, traditionally siloed technical teams interact through complex ticketing systems and ritualistic request procedures and processes. Sometimes they may require director level intervention. A team taking on a more DevOps approach talks about the product throughout its life cycle. They discuss requirements, features, schedules, resources, and whatever else might come up. The focus is on the product, not building fiefdoms and amassing political power. Production and build metrics are available for everyone to see and are predominantly displayed. The current infrastructure is also well documented, and maybe someone went to the trouble of having it printed on a plotter and printed out in the office. This is also a really great idea. One of the early controversial aspects of what became DevOps was the assertion engineers should be doing on-call rotations. In fact, This idea was presented in a way that made it sound like your developers would want to be on call if they were truly dedicated to building the best possible product, because they were the ones writing the code. I don't remember now who first articulated the point, but my personal uh, kind of a memory of this was with John Allspaw and Paul Hammond's Flickr talk at Velocity back in 2009. And I think they may have mentioned it there, but regardless, the cultural characteristic here is empowerment. The people who are empowered to directly make an improvement are the ones who are alerted to the defect. Likewise, your team is incentivized around your core goal, creating an awesome product for your customers, whatever that product happens to be. Development isn't rewarding for writing lots of code. Operations isn't punished when all that code doesn't run as expected in production. The team is rewarded when the product is awesome and shares in the improvement process when the product could be more awesome. Okay, now on respect, all team members should respect the other team members. They don't actually have to like each other. That kind of goes without saying. Sometimes we work with people that we don't always like, but everyone needs to recognize the contributions that everyone else makes and treat their team members well. Respectful discussion and listening to others' opinions is a learning experience for everyone. No team should be afraid to speak out for fear of being abused or rudely dismissed. Okay, now finally, trust. Trust is a massive component of achieving culture in DevOps. Operations must trust that development is doing what they are because it's the best plan for the success of the product. And development must trust that QA isn't there to just sabotage their successes. The product manager trusts that operations is going to give objective feedback and metrics after the next deployment. If any one part of the team doesn't trust another part of the team, your tools won't matter. Additionally, if you don't trust the people you work for, why are they working there and why are you working there? A bit of food for thought is it's not about the tools. DevOps is not about the tools. It never is about the tools and it never was about the tools. It is about the things that we've just talked about on here, and it is about that level of open communication, that incentive and responsibility alignment, respect, and trust. So what are the starters to building culture within DevOps? So the first one's around roles and responsibility. So now that development and operations are collaborating closely, it's time to clarify who does what, plus identify any skills gaps. Early in your DevOps journey, start to explore this, as well as any time your team membership changes. This is something that's really, really important. You need to continuously evaluate the roles and responsibilities within your team. Whether you're a United DevOps team or a cross-team working group or cross-functional team, you'll work better together if you explicitly define how you work together. Work with other teams and define rules of engagement. Almost set a social contract between your teams every 6 to 12 months. As people change, as you get more mature, that social contract changes as well. Remember to take a look at it and remember to refresh it periodically. Pre-mortem. Now, what's better than doing a root cause analysis on an incident? Anticipating risks so that you can solve them while there's still time. In the early phases of a project and before big releases, run this before you come across any problems. You would be amazed at how many times you can run pre-mortems and find out any risks beforehand and solve those risks before they become issues. And then finally, retrospectives. It's a classic agile technique, but it's critical for creating a culture of continuous improvement and learning. Retrospectives provide a safe space to discuss what's working, what's not working, and what needs to change. You need to run them regularly after every sprint, but as a very minimum, you should be running them bi-weekly or monthly, depending on your sprint cadence. Let's now look at how you can implement DevOps within your organization. So the first thing is around facing the challenges within your organization. So I've set out some challenges here that are quite common to most organizations that want to adopt DevOps. So the first is that you need a clear vision for the development of your products. And it kind of goes without saying, how do you know what you're working on if it's not clearly defined? Agility that allows teams to work independently but share practices. We'll come on to some of these in a bit more detail when we walk through some of our transformation steps. Focusing on faster releases and increased quality, as well as increasing customer satisfaction, realizing new features more quickly, reducing the amount of failures we receive within our application, and moving to a more modern platform capable of scaling. Those 7 reasons are the most common ones that I come across when it comes to reasons I want to move to DevOps and DevOps transformation and embark on those projects. Right? These are the driving factors that introduce the change that means that we start to go and work through DevOps. So let's have a walk through with some of the steps that are involved to walk through transformation. So the first one is having initial planning workshops. So participants need to include all of the towers that comprise the solution delivery. This includes operations, includes security, development, and business participation as well. I always recommend that the workshops in this step be led by an experienced external consultant or business coach. The key here is to gain executive support and establish common goals and understanding of what a DevOps program will entail. Initial planning is really important. In organizations where many people don't understand DevOps, it can come with some hesitancy in a move to a new way of working. So we need to make sure people understand why. Right? Several small DevOps programs may exist in silos within organizations already, but they're lacking a maturity to scale to the enterprise level. Right? Design thinking is an excellent method to employ because it capitalizes on expertise of all stakeholders and enables them to reach common understanding, and that establishes the necessary buy-in between other teams. So next is around establishing a center of excellence. So creating a center of excellence is inadequate if it's not at the appropriate organization level and has the relevant enterprise authority. It needs to be led by a business leader who has the support and the buy-in of all of the towers that we've discussed. Representation from all delivery towers as well as vendor organizations are active participants in your DevOps Center of Excellence. The participants must be chosen with caution. One of the other things you should know is starting from day one of the transformation, executives from software engineering teams and senior leaders from operations and development, as well as the CTO and CIO, should also be involved in those early discussions. The output of this stage is to establish a common mindset for the DevOps transformation and establish common goals, objectives, and priorities for the work that needs to be done. Around 3 to 5 days into this process, our discussion needs to evolve to a further level of detail and includes the program owner, who is the sponsor of the project. We also need to include representatives from application owners, enterprise architecture, as well as solution architects, delivery leads, and operational leads as well. Over the next 2 weeks, workshops should take place to perform value stream mapping of the software development lifecycle. The goal of this is to further understand in detail the current state of the organization, the development state, detailed delivery processes, and any key performance indicators that are currently attributed to performance. These workshops at this stage also look to expand out of areas that are to be prioritized from an impact perspective. Given the needs described, priority areas are one thing that you should look at carefully. Include elements of your business and understand what they are as you start to move into defining what those are. Around 20 days or so into this process, that same group of people as before should now come back around the table and deep dive into how engineering will look at the end of the process. Right? Take into account everything that you know and everything you know about your high-level goals and ambitions should drive these workshops forward and provide the detail needed to form a plan and direction of travel. One thing that's often clear at this stage is that the team structure is not fit for purpose and does not align with the goals that you've set out. Okay. At this point, outputs would also include a proposed structure for the team going forward, as well as defining any roles and responsibilities. Next is around setting up governance. Okay, so setting it's the most important step in changing the organization's culture. Roles and responsibilities of practitioners will change as a result of Agile and DevOps. To be able to succeed, they require awareness, enablement, and empowerment. It's critical that they understand the collaboration between organizations that have historically had animosity between them in order to break down organizational walls. KPIs must shift away from individual metrics towards customer business outcomes. Establishing governance is not as hard as it is made to sound. Your governance program consists of three main things: a communication plan, an enablement program, and established KPIs. Your communication plan involves frequently publicizing your program's objectives, milestones, and successes. From an enablement perspective, this needs to be looking at agile fundamentals for your business leaders so they understand the critical elements. Enablement also includes starting to look at the platform and toolchain for those teams, as well as deeper training on DevOps approaches such as continuous integration, deployment, testing, feedback, and improvement. And finally, your KPIs must come from solid metrics, a good strategy to measure, and a frequent and detailed reporting cadence, as well as milestones for the transformation. Next is around an intake process. The first sprint that onboards a program sets the tone for the rest of the sprints. It is not so much a matter of tools and processes as one of proper sizing of tools and processes. The selection of accelerators, tool chains, and development methods must be fit for purpose. Once established, the intake process must be communicated throughout the organization. Collect feedback and involve and mature on a continuous basis. Don't set this in stone at the beginning and leave it throughout the process. Reusable assets are key to having an effective intake process. Solid architecture patterns, automation scripts, operational cookbooks, and infrastructure assets are all real critical things that need to be defined and agreed and once reused in multiple different scenarios. The success of sprints comes down to those best practices. Best practices help enforce consistency and help repeatable results, not only across pilot teams, but also when the transformation is scaled up, ensuring you've defined practices for trunk-based development patterns and test automation, as well as test-driven development and continuous integration are all keys to success. Identifying and initiating pilots. Okay. When applied to a specific portfolio of applications or a domain solution, this step has the best chance of success. Prior to the workshop, I strongly advise opening some working sessions to identify an area of development work that represents a portfolio to scale to the enterprise. The goal of this step is to conduct a value stream mapping exercise with participants from all towers from a specific application. It must be done in sufficient detail to identify the current end-to-end process, the tooling that's in place, as well as manual and automated processes, skills, and the people involved in the process. The collaboration of subject matter experts from the COE with the project team is the next step in the project intake process. The goal is to provide advice on the to-be process, including the necessary tooling, the reusable assets, automation, and SMEs from operations, security, and other relevant areas. The application Scrum team will be made up of SMEs. Identified KPIs for the program are captured as the application goes through its development and test cycle, and this is absolutely required for comparison with existing KPIs. For the assessment of your current capabilities, it's important to understand the pockets of DevOps that exist within your organization. Some of those pockets may be more mature than you realize, and you may be able to take some of the good practices already in place and use them in other parts of your transformation. The assessments can be done in a number of different ways, but it needs to be something that's repeatable, as you'll need to reuse those assessments throughout your transformation in order to check your progress and realign if needed. Assessments need to be broad, but also detailed. Over time, the ambition should be to run assessments with a team, have them score each question using a set of cards, and discuss the scores among the team to agree on actions for improvement. Periodically, we should also look at performing more detailed assessments as well. This change up asks different sets of questions and challenges in certain other focus areas. A more detailed assessment would look at things outside of some of the areas that we've looked at, and would look at things like how you conduct value stream mapping, governance, as well as release, but also things like service catalog and also version management processes as well. So performing transformation exercises. So performing the action that needs to be executed to move the transformation forward depends on the output of the planning workshops. Looking back at the things we've talked about so far, let's look at some of the things that we could do to aid with transformation. So one of the things is the Lego chocolate and scrum game. So the Lego chocolate and scrum game is something that's widely available, and it's a simulation game that provides participants with the opportunity to hear real world struggles they face and then act out scenarios that remove blockers so that they can see the results of moving them. The aim is to sell Lego animals on the marketplace and produce as many as you can that meet the requirements stated. As each sprint begins, roles change, blockers are removed, improving the chances of delivering more. It's a powerful exercise that, in my experience, is more powerful than a simple slide deck explaining the benefits of DevOps. The aim of the game is for people to sit in groups and then use a set of role cards that determine specific activities that they can perform. And people run through those time-boxed exercises that we call sprints. Some of the other things we could do is around running workshops, around transforming to agile working and reorganizing your team structure. And that could be to any number of different ones. There's not really enough time to talk about them in a lot of detail, as well as getting on the feedback loop as well. There's a number of different things that you can do, including looking at how you run retrospectives and how you do some of the ceremonies within there as well. So the last thing is around scaling out the transformation. The penultimate step is to take feedback from your pilot metrics and scale them by running multiple release trains from various application portfolios. Okay, it's insufficient to simply perform daily builds and automated deployments. Continuous feedback and optimization are the final pieces of the DevOps puzzle. Notice that I mentioned this is the penultimate step. Actually, you should never finish. Just because you have negotiated transformation does not mean that you are finished. It's an opportunity to take on what you have learned from your pilot groups and give feedback to sponsors, product owners, and stakeholders. So with that, I want to say thank you for joining. So this was very quick journey into some of the things that we can do to implement DevOps throughout your organization. If you want to follow up with any questions, you can catch me on Twitter. My handle is Mr. Coops. That's MRCOUPS. I'm more than happy to answer questions or engage in conversation if you've got any questions about the session. But with that, thank you for attending, and I hope you enjoy the conference.